All right, team, we are back for After Hours today. We are going to bring you a banger show discussing a multitude of different topics today. I'm Gavin Lowther. This is Matthew Breenan. This is After Hours. And so on today's show, we are going to be discussing a lot in depth about Bitcoin. I know many of you that watch the show aren't Bitcoiners, but we are going to get into Bitcoin today as we really don't. And I want to discuss some high level news articles and some things coming out of the Saylor camp. As well, towards the end, our featured story, hopefully, it's going to be this formal session of our Casper thoughts and ideas with new protocols coming to the Casper network, new DeFi utility coming to the Casper network, which is what we were hoping for this year. So we're going to be discussing that at the end. But Maddie, let's start off the show with this crazy weekend we saw in risk on markets and Bitcoin going, well, dropping a little bit, but our altcoins really got killed this weekend. Maddie, what happened?
Oh my God. It was a real bloodbath out there, and that's no secret. I'm sure most of you guys have plugged into the charts. I mean, I would imagine you plugged into the charts by now and kind of taken a quick peek at what's going on out there. So first of all, there's just like some pairings that if you guys are very brand new to crypto, that might seem a little confusing to you. Like, why did altcoins get hurt so badly compared to Bitcoin? The biggest reason is, what we'll get to the narrative in a moment, is the Bitcoin dominance surge that we saw. So I actually went back and I looked at Bitcoin dominance over the past several years, and I've seen lots of examples over, let's say, the 2 or 3 days, actually increasing more than we've seen dominance now. But I was unable to find an example of a spike in Bitcoin dominance like we saw now. So, the spike that we saw in Bitcoin dominance today just left this massive wick. We still have to close today's daily candle, but we're getting close. But that spike was so huge. Bitcoin came down a little bit, right? Like we saw Bitcoin down a few percent. We kind of came down to like that 91K region, but was sustaining pretty well. But when you get that pairing of both a drop in Bitcoin and then a increase in Bitcoin dominance, altcoins are always hurt disproportionately. Now, the bigger catalyst that obviously drove this, right, was the tariffs that Trump was imposing. So we saw a big blanket tariff push for Canada, Mexico, China, and this morning EU, essentially threatening some tariffs out there if he doesn't get what he wants, right? And we saw a little bit of resolution this morning with Mexico, at least, where Mexican president offered 10,000 soldiers to go, patrol the border to help stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. In exchange for a 1-month pause on those potential 25% tariffs that we be putting on Mexico. So again, I think some of the bigger optimism is that over these next several weeks, more negotiation gets reached, and a lot of these tariffs maybe go away or lessened in a much lesser amount of tariff. And we'll kind of see how that works out. But, definitely huge knee-jerk reaction from the crypto market. Of course, it was the only market that was open over the weekend. We actually saw on Sunday the pre-market for the stock market was much, much lower. But by the time we actually had our market open this morning, we had some of that news in relations to some, at least some lessening of that intensity with Mexico. And I think the market started to adjust that as some potential forward progress. So again, I think the market still needs several days to digest this price action. I don't think that anyone needs to be calling for no more chop, straight up from here, V-bottom forever, right? We definitely need to let the market breathe this out, but that's kind of some of the things that we saw over the weekend that created some of this volatility with the altcoin market specifically.
Yeah, Maddie, we saw the total market cap of crypto drop down to 2.81 billion, which is crazy. And
I think trillion, right?
Oh yeah, trillion. Why did I say billion?
No
what
worries.
year are we
That'll be
in,
a
Gavin?
tiny
What
market,
year are
right?
we in?
This is 2013.
But anyways, Maddie, this wick that we saw is insane because it looks like
Right.
these traders were completely liquidated, getting rid of all of these traders and their stop losses. And I wanted to ask you, for the grander scheme of Bitcoin here, as we have been awaiting higher prices to get back into price discovery mode, was this the last big dip for Bitcoin before we see the next leg higher?
Bitcoin didn't really violate any of its major support levels. We'll actually kind of just come to the chart here really quickly as a team, just so we can take a look and just so you guys can kind of visualize what's happened here. So it's been a lot of volatility up in this range. And again, you guys have seen a lot of my talks where I've given about some of the larger imbalances left behind. So in this next bear market for Bitcoin, I do expect, those 60s to be revisited at the minimum. So let's not, forget those as prices that are going to be important to us in the future. But let's talk about where we are current market wise. So we've had a fair amount of support that's come in at these bottom of range, right? And then we've got the top of range up here. So just roughly, let's call 88.7, 88.8 the low here, and we'll call it 106.5 kind of like the top of range. We got wicks all over the place, but this is kind of where the meat of the price action has been closed. So we've had a lot of volatility with Bitcoin candles in here, and for a variety of different reasons. But you can even see this January 13 candle over here was crazy volatile. You wicked down, you scared a lot of traders, you took out a lot of stop losses, you resumed the trend here, we recovered over the 50-day, started to see bounces off the 50-day, not quite able to break over that ceiling of resistance, and then obviously off off that last down candle, push down towards that 91K region or so. So if you kind of look at really more of where most of the wicking has occurred in here, where like most of the testing that's occurred in here, we didn't really violate this bottom of range per se. We really just kind of continued to retrieve liquidity off the bottom of this zone here. Now, again, market makers do look at where liquidation prices are for a majority of traders. They know where all of your stop losses are because they're the ones making the market. So they know where that price is, where they're able to take a lot of people out of the market and then resume trend there. So Bitcoin definitely has shown a lot of resilience off the low 80s and high 90s in here. This range is also just a very sideways range. So definitely need to obviously see that break over, this like 105, 106 level to start seeing some meaningful moves higher. But I think short term, 90K or so has shown incredible resilience here for Bitcoin, because again, the reality is if we lose kind of this high 80, low 90K range, we've got a very, very long way to fall for Bitcoin if that is lost. So we should be, as a team, rooting for Bitcoin to maintain the zone here. I was calling for higher dominance levels actually for quite some time now. I said I don't think we're done with Bitcoin dominance. A lot of people are like, it's time to crash and altcoins to get their time to shine. I was definitely still of the camp, and I still am, that Bitcoin dominance does have more room to the upside. Now that doesn't mean that we have to continue to see Bitcoin move down and dominance move up, but I think that dominance has another like 10 to 18% more to the upside potentially as this market progresses. So as long as we continue to see, kind of Bitcoin make that march up, altcoins will recover even with increases in Bitcoin dominance. They will just see bigger rallies when Bitcoin is stable or moving up, and then seeing those sheds in dominance. So I'm still of the greater theology that dominance has higher to go for Bitcoin.
Looking at that chart right there, Maddie, it almost looks like Bitcoin wasn't even hurt that bad. Yeah, that wick doesn't look all that great. But when you look at altcoin charts, like we had API 3, guys, set a new low, which completely makes
painful.
which honestly, Maddie, makes me look like a loser for last December, maybe not loser, but maybe like, hey, like I had this very good fun. Hey, API 3 is going to catch up with the rest of the altcoins. And now we are seeing API 3 set a new low. And this is why I didn't just drop large amounts of API 3. Well, I was doing so, lowering my cost basis. But now, Maddie, we're seeing a new low on API 3. So what do you got to do now? You got to add more to your API 3 position and lower your cost basis, which I don't have a problem doing with here, team. And so I'm actually really excited for these opportunities. And Maddie, I know it doesn't always look good, but with our kind of ideas here about these bigger corrections, we are always looking to hop on these opportunities because that's what we see it as, an opportunity. It's not a time for us to get sad. I know we were talking about, our Sunday nights and how we felt about the reaction. But personally, I just flipped my phone over. I was like another day in crypto, because that's really what it is. And you take these days to buy more crypto, not to spend that time being like, oh, well, I shouldn't have bought that. No, buy more, being able to allocate more. And if you are limited on funds, then maybe you should have just been, dollar cost averaging then. Because me, I'm looking at ways I can get more funds and throw it into more of the crypto markets. I used up all of my dry powder, which is like, haha, like you didn't do it properly. It's like, well, my API 3 average is pretty low, Matt, but I'm excited to now, pull some more funds in to add to my crypto bags like API 3, like Casper. What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I still have a DCA on. DCA is basically comprised right now of Casper, HNT, and API 3. That really hasn't changed. That's actually the same DCA that was on prior to this market correction here. I did do some spot buying the other day, 2 days ago. So actually before we had that second down candle, I bought more Zcash actually. I bought HNT, I bought API 3. And that's pretty much it. And I bought some sushi as well, not a ton, but I bought a little bit of all of those. And I also, when I look at some of these market buys, right, like you can never time the market perfectly. You're never going to nail the exact bottom of the market. But I looked at kind of where some of my averages were. I looked at kind of just where we were structurally wise. And I was like, when I look at the grander risk reward ratio on daily, 3-day, and weekly charts, like I'm very happy with this price. I have zero doubt that we're going to see alts do really, really well. I think that you see when these events happen, like a lot of people will start to post, the hyper doom post, no alt season, the top is in, you guys should have sold 4 months ago. This is it. The market's over, right? But I have a very hard time believing that this was the top for ETH. ETH doesn't make a new all-time high this cycle, and other large caps that don't make new all-time highs this cycle, including, AVAX and Chainlink and Polkadot, right? Like I have a hard time believing that's the reality. So I think that, when we do get a really nice reversal, higher in Bitcoin, maybe crack a new high, start to see some pullbacks and dominance. A lot of these buys that we make now, whether we bought them 15% lower, 50% higher than current market, it's really not going to matter too much in the grand scheme. So I'm probably done for the most part. in the short term doing any sort of like spot buying out of dry powder. But as far as the monthly contribution I make via DCA, that's just staying on consistently. Once I see maybe a larger reversal in the market where we're over some of those areas of interest where I'm kind of raising my average, I'll turn that DCA off, and that monthly contribution will basically go all to dry powder until I see better opportunities that arise. So for the time being, it's basically just DCA. If you guys do have some dry powder, you guys can still set some limits, right? When you guys see these wicks come down, sometimes they will get filled again, or they partially get filled. If you look at where areas of support and resistance are, maybe towards the bottom of wicks, you can try to target those with some limits. There are opportunities. So even when we got the H&T bounce the other day, and everyone's like, "Damn, I missed the H&T bounce. It's up 28%." And I was like, "Yeah, but this was a liquid zone. It could get tested again." You guys actually did get that opportunity again. So try not to chase opportunity. DCA the stuff that you want to better your average on. Set limits on stuff that you feel good about those areas potentially getting filled again, and then just let the market breathe out, right? Like most of you guys are cycle traders, so treat your positions like cycle positions. Don't treat them like day trading positions. Otherwise, if you're going to be day traders, guess what you need? You need a stop loss, you need to take profit, and you need entry. You guys don't have other things. Why? Because you're not day traders. So you can't have it all, right? You can't have the instant every day be a good day, but then also have the weathering of the position for long-term success, right? You can't have it all.
I like that, Maddie. And for my position, I have just been buying in clumps what I can. So like for Casper, for this instance, you're getting 15% APY on Casper.live, buying up all that Casper on MEXC, and then being able to stake it on Casper.live and earning that yield. That has worked tremendously. And team, I know we do not have video content like that available on our YouTube, but you can get that content over at CryptoCharge. Team, check us out at CryptoCharge. Click the pin link down below. I already know we're halfway through the show and we're doing our little shill here, but do that anyways, team. If you need true insights into crypto, you can really get that at CryptoCharge. So use code YouTube when signing up. You get access to the shows, the tools, the community, the Discord, and have access to the team over there. And you can see all the responses like yesterday where I was like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And some people are like, do I have to lower my Fibonacci on my chart? Because now it's like we already set a new low, and it's like, yeah, swing high, swing low. That's the whole point of the Fibonacci sequence here. And so team, check us out over there using code YouTube. I was going to get into some Bitcoin news events because we rarely cover Bitcoin here. But just some big ones like Larry Fink, talking about his prediction for Bitcoin, which he was a Bitcoin skeptic, and just the spot Bitcoin ETF issuers, they have all accumulated like 1.1 million BTC. So that's pretty tremendous here, team, seeing institutional accepting Bitcoin and also putting their money where their mouth is and offering products for older people that want to get exposure to Bitcoin that can't open up a Coinbase account, which we would argue is pretty easy. Opening up a Coinbase account, KYCing, adding funds to your Coinbase account is pretty easy. I think we would all agree here, buying the underlying asset matters more for all of us here. Because isn't that the whole point of crypto, Matt? Is so that you can have possession over your whole crypto? Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely. And, again, a lot of the older generation could care less about that value of it, right? Like they don't care about sovereignty or decentralization or any of that stuff, right? It's all about, is this safe? How much exposure? And in a lot of these institutions that do sell the ETFs, now they can work with a financial advisor and they can work with a plan to say, all right, like what kind of exposure should I have? How do I allocate this? How should I buy this over time? They don't have to feel like they have to do it all on their own. Now, of course, there's lots of fees with ETFs and, paying your financial advisor and the commissions on those. So it's not, it's going to be a more expensive route. But for a group of people, a cohort of people that would never have had exposure otherwise, that cost to them is very much worth it to have the peace of mind of like, all right, I can look at the performance with the rest of my portfolio. My financial advisor said this is a good amount, and I can look at this over a 10 or 15 year period. So I think it's net positive for that group of people. Obviously, that's not the group of people that we try to educate at CryptoCharge because we want to help you guys be as self-independent as possible. But I think net positive for the long-term growth of digital assets.
Maddie, we were talking about before the show just about MicroStrategy, and we really haven't covered MicroStrategy in depth here because they are a corporate publicly traded company that is doing exuberant amounts of Bitcoin buying. And many people look at the MicroStrategy Bitcoin buying strategy, let's call it, and they're like, oh, they're just buying Bitcoin. It's very simple. And it's really not that simple. They have developed a strategy to, on the surface, it looks like they're just buying Bitcoin. But how do you get funds to buy Bitcoin? All right. You start borrowing money with favorable terms like 0 or 1% interest rates like the Silvergate loan that MicroStrategy did. So very favorable terms to borrow money. And then they issue new MicroStrategy stock. And I think this is the point because they are raising the total market share of MSTR and they are using the raising of those funds to buy more Bitcoin, right? This is the the generational idea that Michael Saylor had to buy more Bitcoin. That is a good way to buy more Bitcoin. Getting loans is nothing new here. And then they use their business profits, which is like a small percentage of how they're buying Bitcoin. And then they're able to borrow against their Bitcoin, keeping a 50% LTV to buy more Bitcoin. So they have like 4 ways here that they're buying Bitcoin. It is really crazy to think about. But as you guys know here, we are all, Matt and I here, I am really interested in how does this strategy works out. Because if Bitcoin surges, the company will see success, right? But what if Bitcoin goes into a bear market? So let's cover what Michael Saylor had to say. I believe it was yesterday he posted to Twitter saying this. Last week, MicroStrategy did not sell any shares of Class A common stock under its at-the-market equity offering program and did not purchase any Bitcoin as of February 2nd, 2025. MicroStrategy holds 471,107 Bitcoin, acquired for $30.4 billion at 64,511 per Bitcoin. So that is their holding of Bitcoin right here, Maddie. So let's just take some hypotheticals here. If you guys can follow a hypothetical, I'm about to give you one. If Bitcoin was to hit 180,000 per Bitcoin, their holdings would be worth $84.8 billion, okay? Now, we just talked about what it's worth today. So in the grand scheme of things, it's like, oh, it's only that. You could buy altcoins and turn that money around faster, right, Matt? Which is like, we're trying to make our money work harder for us over here. And he's okay with buying Bitcoin because it's the new monetary system, of course. But let's talk about if Bitcoin enters a bear market, Maddie, which this is where it gets interesting for me. If Bitcoin hits $35,000, which I was talking to someone this weekend, I'm not going to out him, but he was like, we are not going to see Bitcoin under 50K this bull market. We are in a new regime. Everything's different now. It was like, well, what you're claiming right now is ahistorical. The last 2 bear markets, we have seen Bitcoin pull back to 77% and 84%. So what you are asking for from Bitcoin here is ahistorical. And I'm not going to take that advice for my investing decisions, right? So if we hit $35,000, MicroStrategy is going to be under 45% of their current cost basis if we just calculate if they didn't add any more to their position right now, which they will, right? So Maddie, my question to you is, how does MicroStrategy potentially get through a whole year of sitting underwater, which is going to happen if Bitcoin gets to 35K or if they get close to their margin call? Let's say Bitcoin gets to 21K. We've had these instances in the past where people say, oh, Bitcoin won't hit that price, but it did, just like last bear market, right? What is the upside here for MicroStrategy?
Yeah, so I mean, if they do get into that situation where, they're maybe treading water a little bit, they can definitely restructure debt. There are options to, help offset those short-term pains. Now, of course, those are band-aids, right? And a lot of those short-term restructuring options can carry like higher interest rates. So that obviously kind of eats into your long-term profits. So there are like, abilities. It's not like Michael Saylor has to start selling Bitcoin immediately at those prices. Am I personally of the belief that 32K has to get hit in this next cycle? No, I've done the math, right? And I've looked at the different, potentials of like the 1.618 being like the only one we hit right now, which is already like we've exceeded that a little bit, right? So I highly doubt that Bitcoin only hits this 1.618. So we're probably looking at somewhere closer to like 150 to like 240,000 being the top. If we get all the way to like 240K, right, based on the Fibonacci's, and we see kind of what we've seen in the past, minus 70, minus 80, we're probably going to land somewhere in like the low to mid 50s, high 60s, right? That's probably kind of where we're going to be at. But it would still deviate below the previous all-time high for Bitcoin. I think that from a structural perspective, if I had to kind of like eliminate per se like Fibonacci's and like historical drawdown, I would say closer to 38K would be a very big area of interest that should have been satiated at some point. But if we get out to these astronomical prices and we start to see some sort of correction in the market, that would actually be larger corrections than we've seen previously. But I think to answer the question though, like what happens if Michael Saylor does go underwater? It's possible that he would maybe have to sell some Bitcoin. I think it would also have to do with like investor sentiment it at the time of like, how good do they feel about the long-term growth of Bitcoin? Are they looking at MicroStrategy as an undervalued opportunity at this point? One of those asymmetrical bets? Do you have enough people that are willing to take that asymmetrical bet on newly issued stock, or newly issued stock after some sort of like short-term debt restructuring has been done at a higher interest rate? There's a lot to consider. So when you also look at the restructuring of debt, this is a very big piece of debt, and why, maybe if you guys remember when we had the whole banking crisis happen, because that's how fractional reserve banking works, right? Like they're only holding like a 1/12 of the money that is actually out there floating around. When you have a rate environment that changes very dramatically, like we saw in this last hiking cycle, it puts immense pressure on people who have outstanding debt. Because when they have to restructure at the new rates, right? Like no one's going to offer you a rate that is significantly less than what the overnight rates are to the Fed, to the banks, right? Because they want to make a profit as well. So if rates have doubled since you last took out that debt, you now have to re-amortize that debt at a much higher rate. So he's banking on a lot of things, right? He's banking on that price will continue to make higher lows well above his cost basis over long periods of time. He's banking on the fact that he has secured good enough loans that, the LTV is going to be sufficient, and he's not going to have to deal with restructuring. And he's also betting on a friendly rate environment that if he does have to do it, that he'll likely be able to do that at a rate that's not going to crush the overall business model. And of course, under the hood, I'm sure there's a lot of complexities with MicroStrategy that I don't understand. But those are just a lot of the things that I know for a fact to be true. And we've seen through a lot of like very good quality, like long-standing businesses during that big banking crisis that happened because of that very quick elevation in rate environment. And then looking at some of those debts that were sold at much different rates.
Maddie, I've tried to cut half the show here. I had like a whole outline here to get into more like Casper stuff and some more crypto news stuff, but we are just running out of time. And so I kind of want to change the direction to the end of the show. So whatever as it relates to Casper updates will be on the next after hours show. So going to change some things up a little bit. But I did want to ask you this question because it has been on my heart, because I've got to study Bitcoin more, got to study the altcoin market over this past year. And I got to actually see this play out. I'm very excited with my portfolio, Maddie, to be honest, and how I have positioned it. But I do like the opportunity of the rotational markets, of being able to rotate my crypto in and out of one another. And obviously it gets very complex, but let's just say for a second that I bought all Bitcoin in the bear market, and Bitcoin is leading ahead the altcoin market by, on average here, the rest. And I know my XRP and my other cryptos, HBAR, has done really well, and so I can't complain. But leading my money in with Bitcoin, then scaling out back into XRP and HBAR was on the table for me this bull run that I was not able to capitalize on because I did not buy no Bitcoin, right? I didn't do any of that. I bought all my altcoins that I'm super happy with. But if we're talking about rotations here, I could have absolutely capitalized on that move, right? And I know I can't predict the future here, and not everything's always the same, but Bitcoin runs ahead a lot of the altcoin market here. So I did want to talk to you about just Bitcoin here for a second, just to cap it off. Since we talked so much about Bitcoin here and now, would you ever actually consider buying Bitcoin in the future, whether in the bear market or even in another territory where Bitcoin actually does become the new monetary system here in America, where we just do away with the US dollar? If that was to happen, I know we've talked about the likelihoodness of that, but if that was to happen, what are your thoughts?
I mean, Bitcoin would have to scale tremendously in order for that to even be a thing, right? So I would say that, Bitcoin scaling from less than 30 transactions per second right now up to even like where Visa's at right now is going to take a lot of effort, right? And now a lot of people are going to be like, but the Lightning Network, but that's technically not just running on the Bitcoin network, right? Like you're still using a side chain, and that side chain's not the equivalent of using the raw chain itself. Not saying it's not powerful or useful, it's very different. But like, let's put that aside, right? Like the whole monetary system hypothetically runs on Bitcoin. First of all, I need to see the pricing that makes sense, right? Like the risk reward still needs to make sense. If Bitcoin doesn't offer a deep enough discount, even if it's a front runner position, I don't know if I'd want to risk that play if there's other alts opportunities that I like out there that are maybe not going to run first, but I know have a more concrete risk to reward ratio and have pulled back more deeply in their structures. So let's say Bitcoin reaches 240K, and then let's say like new bear market low is established at some ridiculously shallow level, like $100,000. I don't think I would build a Bitcoin position at that point. You come down to maybe 48K, 47K, 50K, and we're expecting Bitcoin to make a run towards 350, 400, 500,000 next cycle. Yeah, that might be worth loading a small position in Bitcoin. But I would say somewhere in the realm of like 10, maybe 20% tops, but I wouldn't do any other ads after that. Like meaning like Bitcoin takes off from that bear market accumulation zone. The rest of my focus is going to be on building the alt portfolio. Even if I see Bitcoin running, I'm not going to chase the Bitcoin all the way up. So I think that would be kind of, I'd say it's a contingent situation where I would add it, but it would still be a very small allocation in the grand scheme. I would still want to be at least at the minimum 80% alts because again, my risk appetite, my appetite for volatility, my obligations, just at my age and where I'm at in life, like it's just not. I just don't have that necessity for constant stability in my portfolio. Where some people they can't weather that and they can't deal with that. And if 6 months from now, if things don't go well, they want to know that maybe Bitcoin's down less than the altcoin market and they can take their money out. That's not how I approach it. So really the risk management for me is more about risk to reward still. And yeah, maybe rotating that leader position. But again, all the stars have to align for me to engage in that leader position trade to give up potentially massive gains from altcoins, because there are some altcoins that are much further back from their accumulation, right? Like, and they're mostly not coming back to those zones for a very long time. So you can sometimes find alts that you do get into and will outperform Bitcoin or even run ahead of Bitcoin. Not all of them, right? So like, there's just not a guarantee that Bitcoin will run ahead of a lot of them, but not necessarily all of them. And we can point to several examples where some of these alts actually led ahead. Render being actually one of those examples where Render breached new all-time highs ahead of Bitcoin and really outperformed Bitcoin vastly, right? But there's no way for me to know that. So to bank strictly on Bitcoin as the guaranteed winner, right? And also let's even point to ETH this cycle. This is a good example. Yeah. ETH technically, right, from all previous cycles should have gone second, right? Like it should have been the second one to poke a new all-time high. Dozens and dozens of alts have poked new all-time highs, not ETH yet, right? And I don't think that's not going to happen, but like banking on the exact same scenario each and every cycle can get you burned, especially if you're overly, heavy in that position.
Mm-hmm. I do like that, Maddie. No, and that's why, like with my argumentation, like with people, I always, if they point something up to me, I want them to back their claim, and then usually their claims like the one I laid out today about Bitcoin doing something different. Like with my example, I said Bitcoin top was 180, 80% pullback, you got 35K. All right. What you are asking for a 50K Bitcoin or a 60K Bitcoin on a pullback from 180K is something that Bitcoin would have to do that's ahistorical, that it's never done before. Okay. And so when I make decisions, I want to make sure it's based in history, and so I'm not making up my new thing. It's good to be aware of the indicators, good to be aware of forecasts with new things that are coming to the crypto market, but I can't make investing decisions on things that are like supposedly going to happen, like Bitcoin, we got a strategic reserve coming up, that means I should ape in all into US based cryptos, right? Come on.
Absolutely, man. No, that's a great point. I think that one of the things I think people were so hyper bullish on, right? Like we saw the election come along, and people saw the markets rally into Trump getting into office, saw some really good action in the altcoin market, but then people started to ride that narrative into oblivion, and they were like, "Oh, well, guess what, Matt? Like on inauguration day, crypto's going to go nuts, right? Because he's going to talk about crypto and like he's going to do all this stuff with crypto that's going to be super powerful, right? And he comes out and literally from inauguration day drops, right? Signs crypto executive order, market's flat, does not give a shit, right? And then he turns around and then he issues all these tariffs on the weekend, which again, like, come on guys, like I know like, we can all feel about political, we can all say what we want to say. Trump's not a dumb guy. He knows what he's doing, right? Like, so announcing tariffs on a weekend and then watching also his World Liberty TradeFi pick up 86,000 Ethereum at these discounted prices. There is a little bit of manipulation here, right? So like, try not to buy into these narratives, buy into the pricing and the structures that you like, because more often than not, you will miss the narrative. You'll be wrong about the narrative more often than not. I saw so many people were like, I got to get my money in before inauguration day. And I'm like, why? Like, do you like the price? Well, not necessarily, but like, I got to be in because this is going to happen. I'm like, if you don't like the price, don't get in. If you like the price plus the narrative, great. But like, if it's strictly the narrative and you don't like the price, don't do it.
Yeah, make sure you can substantiate the claim of why this is a good price to buy at too. Don't just say, Maddie's right, but if you're an idiot and you're like, yeah, I like this price, why? Oh man, because XRP's at $3, a week ago. It's like, oh, you're just clueless, aren't you? You're just clueless where we just came from, aren't you? So, Maddie, it is fun being a cycle trader, and that's what I'm really here for, to buy a yacht, not to, buy another house. I want a yacht. I want 3 new houses next year. and I want to be able to retire and then do crypto shows with Maddie here, and, have fun in the Discord and do all that stuff. That's what I'm shooting for here with my portfolio team. So if you like the show, make sure you leave a like. I know we got to cut out our Casper segment, and I was just, hey, executive decision, baby. We started talking about Bitcoin. All right, we got to get through a show talking about Bitcoin. All right, you're probably not going to get one of these for a whole nother month now. So if you got something valuable here, make sure you leave a like. Team, we also got a show this Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, the Ask Maddie Show. Leave your questions down below in the comment section. If they're good, we will pull them up. But Maddie, until Wednesday, we will see them later. Bye.